One day before the wedding, the maid found a hidden contract transferring the Mafia boss's empire to his fiancée. "Do not sign that marriage contract tomorrow," Nia Brooks said from the back seat of Adrian Vale's sedan, her voice so calm that it frightened him more than panic would have. Rain moved across downtown Chicago in silver lines, blurring the courthouse where Adrian was scheduled to marry Celeste Rowan at noon. For 6 months, Adrian had driven Nia from his Lakeshore estate to an early accounting course before continuing to the offices of Vale Hospitality. Adrian was a 39-year-old Caucasian man whose family name carried an old criminal shadow, though his power came from hotels and contracts. Nia was a 30-year-old African-American woman hired as a live-in maid after his aunt's death. She had asked for rides only after her bus route changed. That morning, however, she held a cream envelope stamped with the seal of the Vale Family Trust. Adrian kept both hands on the wheel. "Where did you get that?" Nia met his eyes in the mirror. She wore her charcoal gray uniform beneath a plain black coat. Her natural curls gathered into a low bun, and there was no triumph in her expression. It was hidden inside the linen inventory binder. Someone expected it to be found after the wedding. Inside the envelope was an unsigned amendment transferring control of 3 family hotels to Celeste if Adrian became medically unavailable, legally incapacitated, or publicly accused of financial misconduct. The language was precise. The effective date was 1 day after the ceremony. Adrian had never approved it. Worse, his electronic initials appeared on every page. Celeste was not merely his fiancée. She was the attorney who had reorganized the trust after his aunt died, and the only outsider allowed to prepare documents for his signature. Nia said she had heard Celeste in the estate library the previous night, speaking softly to someone on the phone. She said the wedding was the lock, and the audit would be the key. Adrian pulled into a quiet loading zone instead of continuing toward the courthouse. He wanted the document and phone call to be harmless, but the paper carried a printer code from his private office. Only 4 people knew that code. Adrian looked at the courthouse clock through the ring. In 23 hours, he was expected to promise Celeste complete trust. Instead, he handed the envelope back to Nia and made a decision that could endanger his company and name. "You are not going to class," he said. "You are going to help me prove who prepared this." The clock on the dashboard continued counting toward noon. Adrian knew that postponement alone would not protect him. It would only warn whoever had prepared the papers. He also knew that trusting Nia meant placing his future in the hands of someone his social circle had trained itself not to notice. That fact made her warning more credible, not less. Today, Adrian canceled the courthouse appointment without explanation and told his staff the ceremony had been delayed because of a scheduling dispute. Celeste called within 3 minutes. Her voice was warm, controlled, and edged with concern. Adrian said the trust office had requested an emergency review. She offered to meet him there, but he refused and ended the call before she could ask more. Nia sat beside him now, no longer in the back seat, holding the envelope inside a clear document sleeve. They agreed not to accuse Celeste until the amendment's origin was verified. Nia would share everything she heard, and Adrian would open restricted records. He drove them to the Vale estate, overlooking Lake Michigan. Nia showed him the linen binder on a lower shelf behind a row of estate ledgers. Staff would not use the binder until 10 days after the wedding. Whoever placed it here wanted a delay, Nia said. Adrian noticed a narrow strip of blue paper caught in the binder ring. It was part of a courier receipt from Rowan Legal Services, Celeste's private practice. The receipt listed no recipient, only a tracking number and a delivery time from 5 nights earlier. Adrian photographed it and unlocked his trust desk. Several folders had been rearranged. Nothing obvious was missing, yet one folder contained an unfamiliar checklist for a capacity review. The checklist described memory problems, impulsive financial decisions, and hostile behavior toward advisors. At the bottom, however, Celeste's initials appeared beside the words "documentation pending." If Celeste could frame a delayed wedding and a disputed audit as evidence of instability, the amendment might become more than a hidden draft. It might become part of a legal strategy. Nia asked why the trust allowed any advisor to seek temporary control. Adrian explained that his aunt, Lillian Vale, had written the clause after his father's public scandals nearly destroyed the family companies. Lillian believed oversight could protect the hotels, not be manipulated. A car door closed outside. Celeste had arrived without permission. Adrian moved the folder into the desk and told Nia to return the binder to the shelf. "She cannot know what we found," he said. Nia looked toward the library doors. "Then she cannot see me standing beside you." Adrian understood the cost of that sentence. To protect the truth, he would have to act as though Nia were only an employee, even after she had risked her job to warn him. When Celeste entered, smiling beneath a white umbrella, Adrian stepped between her and the shelf while Nia quietly left through the service hall. Celeste kissed his cheek and asked why the maid had been in the private library. Adrian answered carefully. "She was cleaning up something you left behind." Celeste's smile remained, but her eyes shifted toward the linen binder. Behind them, the library door clicked shut, and Nia realized Celeste had noticed more than Adrian intended. The first consequence arrived before noon. Celeste informed Adrian that 2 hotel lenders had received anonymous messages claiming he had postponed the wedding because of an acute personal episode. Both requested proof that leadership remained stable. If he reacted angrily, Celeste could record his temper as evidence. If he ignored the messages, concern would grow. He called a morning meeting with Daniel Cho, the trust's independent accountant. Daniel, 42, trusted records over people. Nia returned from the service hall after Celeste left. She had overheard only fragments, but she recognized the phrase, acute personal episode, from the capacity checklist. That link gave them their first clear pattern, the hidden amendment, the unfinished checklist, and the lender rumors were parts of one plan. He told Nia to remain at the estate and speak to no one. She refused. "You asked me to help prove who prepared the document. You did not hire me as a witness and then order me to forget what I saw." Adrian reminded her that the Vale name attracted scrutiny and that Celeste could destroy Nia's reputation by claiming she stole private papers. Nia replied that her reputation mattered precisely because she had earned it without his protection. For 3 years, she had worked nights, paid tuition, and kept exact logs. She would not let him turn her into a secret he could dismiss when convenient. Their argument exposed the power imbalance. Adrian owned the house, signed her paychecks, and controlled access to every record. Nia saw what powerful people ignored. She knew which courier entered through the kitchen, which printer jammed on heavy paper, and which guest asked staff to leave rooms before making calls. Adrian finally apologized, not with charm, but with a written protection. He drafted a temporary witness agreement stating that Nia had reported suspected document fraud, that she was authorized to preserve relevant household records, and protected her from retaliation. They both signed it, and Daniel received a scanned copy. Nia then opened the estate's delivery log. 5 nights earlier, a Rowan legal courier had arrived at 8:14 p.m. The signature looked like Nia's, but she had been attending class at that hour. Security footage from the service entrance had been erased during a scheduled system update. The maintenance note authorizing that update carried Adrian's electronic initials. He had not approved it. Nia compared the forged signature with her own entries and found one small mistake. She always wrote the date before her initials. The false entry reversed the order. Adrian stared at the page. Someone had not merely used his authority. Someone had studied Nia closely enough to imitate her, then failed because they did not understand her habits. The betrayal had expanded. Celeste's plan required both Adrian and Nia to appear unreliable. Daniel replied that the altered log should be preserved before anyone learned they had identified the error. Daniel arrived at the estate after sunset with an encrypted copy of the trust's transaction history. The amendment was unfiled but still dangerous. It could be signed, backdated, and filed for temporary control. More troubling was a series of small legal payments from a hotel renovation account to Rowan Legal Services. Each stayed below the board approval threshold. Together, they totaled $184,000. Celeste had described them as regulatory review fees. Daniel found no matching invoices in the company archive. Nia noticed that the payment dates aligned with private events at the estate, Lillian's memorial, Adrian's engagement dinner, and 2 lender receptions. On each date, Celeste had office access. They needed invoices, metadata, or testimony. Adrian asked whether Daniel could trace the authorization device. Daniel said the approvals came from Adrian's registered tablet. But the network logs placed the device inside the estate when Adrian had been attending public events across the city. Adrian remembered leaving the tablet in a locked desk. Nia remembered Celeste borrowing the library key during Lillian's memorial. Celeste appeared to have spent months building a record that could portray Adrian as careless, unstable, or dishonest while diverting company funds through legitimate-looking legal fees. If Celeste intended to take control after the wedding, why hide an unsigned amendment where it would eventually be found? Nia suggested the document might not have been hidden by Celeste. Someone else could have placed it in the binder as a warning. Daniel reviewed the courier tracking number from the torn receipt. The package came from Rowan Legal, through the trust's storage courier. The listed sender was not Celeste. It was Maribel Santos, a contract paralegal who had left Rowan Legal 2 weeks earlier. Maribel was not yet willing to speak. Daniel found a resignation email in which Maribel cited ethical concerns regarding client authorization. Celeste had replied that the concerns were unfounded and that any disclosure would violate confidentiality. Adrian wanted to contact Maribel immediately. Nia stopped him. A direct call from Adrian Vale could look like pressure from a powerful employer. Instead, Daniel sent a neutral request asking Maribel to preserve records and speak through independent counsel. That choice marked the first real trust between Adrian and Nia. He accepted restraint when force would have been easier. She accepted that his name could be used responsibly when supported by process. Before Daniel left, he revealed one more finding. The trust's digital archive contained a draft invoice with hidden revision history. The original author field belonged to Maribel. The last editor was Celeste. In the comments, one sentence remained undeleted. Client did not authorize this description. The document proved internal disagreement, but not yet fraud. Then Daniel opened the file properties and found a scheduled deletion date set for midnight after the wedding. Daniel placed the file under legal hold, ensuring the scheduled deletion could no longer erase its history. Securely, they spent the night preserving records. Daniel created verified copies of the archive, while Adrian documented every device and account he could access. Nia worked through the household logs, matching visitors, deliveries, and room access with the dates of questionable payments. At 2 in the morning, Adrian made coffee and placed a cup beside her without asking how she took it. He had noticed months earlier that she used cinnamon but no sugar. Nia accepted it as care. Their bond had grown through repeated choices. He listened when she challenged him, and she stayed when leaving would have protected her. Near dawn, Nia found the most important physical clue in a locked cabinet used for archived stationery. One box of trust letterhead contained a stack of practice sheets. Someone had tested Adrian's electronic initials at different sizes and printed them on blank pages. The sheets carried faint horizontal marks from the library printer's damaged feed roller. The hidden amendment carried the same marks. Adrian's first reaction was shame. The house that represented his control had become the workshop for a campaign against him. Nia reminded him that failing to predict betrayal was not the same as authorizing it. She also told him something she had kept private. She had started accounting classes because Lillian Vale once encouraged her to build a career beyond domestic work. Lillian had paid the first semester anonymously through a community scholarship, but Nia discovered the source after her death. She stayed at the estate partly from gratitude and partly because she wanted to understand whether the woman's trust had been managed honestly. Adrian realized that Nia's loyalty was not obedience to him. It was a commitment to standards Lillian had tried to preserve. He showed Nia a sealed letter Lillian had left in the trust file. In it, Lillian warned Adrian that family power would attract people who loved access more than responsibility. She urged him to choose partners who could disagree with him without seeking to control him. Adrian had read the letter as advice about business. Now it sounded like a judgment on his engagement. At breakfast, Celeste arrived with a revised wedding schedule and an expression of patient concern. She said delaying again would feed rumors and offered a solution: sign a temporary management authorization so she could reassure lenders while Adrian rested. The authorization used softer language than the hidden amendment, but its effect was similar. Adrian asked why she had prepared it without consulting Daniel. Celeste answered that Daniel was an accountant, not family. Nia entered with a tray and saw Celeste glance at the cabinet where the practice sheets had been found. For 1 second, Celeste's composure failed. Her gaze stopped, then moved away too quickly. Nia set down the tray. and Celeste addressed her with false kindness. "You must be exhausted. Perhaps you should take several days off." Nia replied, "I prefer to finish what I started." Celeste understood the challenge. After she left, Adrian tore the temporary authorization in half. It was not evidence, but it was a moral choice. He would rather face public uncertainty than grant private control to someone he no longer trusted. Celeste struck back that afternoon. A confidential complaint reached the hotel board alleging that Adrian had formed an improper personal relationship with a household employee and had given her access to protected financial information. The complaint named Nia and attached photographs of her riding in Adrian's car, entering the trust office, and meeting Daniel after hours. The images showed no misconduct but implied it. Celeste called Adrian and said she had received the complaint from an anonymous source. She offered to protect him if he dismissed Nia, signed the management authorization, and proceeded with the wedding privately. Adrian documented the call in a legal memo. Instead, Daniel joined the call as a disclosed participant when Celeste called again. She immediately changed her language, saying only that Adrian should separate emotional concerns from governance. The rift between Adrian and Nia came not from the accusation itself, but from his response. He told her she should move temporarily to a hotel suite under company security and avoid public contact. Nia heard the same command he had given before: disappear so his reputation could survive. She placed the witness agreement on his desk and asked whether its protection was real or merely convenient. Adrian insisted he was trying to keep her safe. Nia answered that safety without choice was another form of control. "You cannot protect my name by removing me from my own testimony." She packed one suitcase and left because Adrian still confused responsibility with possession. Before leaving, Nia gave Daniel copies of her logs and kept one verified copy for herself. She moved to a modest apartment owned by a classmate's family, refusing Adrian's money. That evening, Maribel responded through an attorney. She was willing to provide a sworn statement if the trust board issued a preservation order and guaranteed that her testimony would not be buried in a private settlement. Maribel explained that Celeste had instructed her to prepare invoices for work never performed and to draft a management amendment using Adrian's stored initials. Maribel refused to finalize the amendment. She printed a draft, enclosed it with a courier receipt, and arranged for it to be placed where estate staff would eventually find it. She had chosen the linen binder because Lillian once required household inventory to be reconciled with trust property. Maribel did not know Nia personally. Her warning had reached the right person because Nia was the only staff member who still followed Lillian's old procedures. The explanation closed one gap and opened another. Maribel said Celeste's plan depended on a public audit letter scheduled for release the morning after the wedding. The letter would accuse Adrian of authorizing false legal payments. Celeste would then present the signed amendment and seek temporary control as his spouse and trust advisor. But Maribel had never seen the final signed version. Someone still needed to make Adrian sign it. Daniel examined the wedding packet Celeste had delivered that morning. Beneath the venue forms was a document labeled Confidential Marital Disclosure. Its signature page belonged to the hidden amendment. Adrian drove to Nia's apartment the next morning, but did not ask her to return. In his navy suit and black wool coat, he apologized without qualification. He admitted his family had always solved problems by moving people out of sight. He had repeated that pattern while telling himself it was protection. Nia listened, then asked what he intended to do differently. Adrian said the board hearing would be public to employees and lenders. Maribel's statement would be submitted through her attorney, and Nia would choose whether and how to testify. Her employment status would remain protected regardless of her decision. He also offered to place the witness agreement under Daniel's independent authority so Adrian could not revoke it alone. Nia agreed to help, but she did not move back to the estate. Trust, she said, would return by action rather than proximity. Daniel traced the questionable payments to 6 invoices. Metadata showed that Maribel created early drafts. Celeste edited the descriptions, and Adrian's tablet approved the transfers from the estate network. The practice sheets established a method for copying his initials. The delivery log showed a forged version of Nia's signature. The printer feed marks linked the practice sheets and hidden amendment to the library printer. Maribel's sworn statement explained Celeste's instructions and her own warning. Nia's household logs placed Celeste alone in the library at the relevant times. Adrian contributed the final piece by surrendering his personal devices for independent examination. Investigators found no approval activity during the payment windows, proving the registered tablet had been used while he was elsewhere. They also found that Celeste had emailed herself a blank signature certificate months earlier under the subject line, wedding forms. The board scheduled an emergency hearing at the flagship Vale Hotel. Celeste responded by filing a letter claiming Adrian was being manipulated by Nia, who supposedly hoped to gain money or status through a romantic relationship. Nia could have denied every personal feeling. Instead, she and Adrian agreed that honesty was stronger than performance. They had developed trust and affection, but no romantic relationship had begun while she depended on him for employment and housing. Nia planned to resign after the hearing and complete her accounting program using her own savings and a scholarship she had already earned. Adrian would not offer money, promotion, or a private settlement in exchange for her testimony. On the evening before the hearing, Nia met Adrian in the empty hotel ballroom where the board would gather. She wore a cream blouse, tailored black trousers, and low black heels instead of her maid's uniform. Adrian asked whether she was afraid. She said yes, but fear did not change the records. He told her he would accept whatever happened to his position. Nia looked at the rows of chairs and answered, "Then tomorrow, let the truth cost what it costs." At that moment, Daniel entered with news. Celeste had submitted a signed version of the amendment. The signature was dated 3 days earlier, when Adrian and Nia had been together preserving records. Celeste had made the mistake they needed. The board hearing began at 9 under bright conference lights, with lenders, department heads, and trust counsel seated behind long tables. Celeste arrived in an ivory suit, carrying the signed amendment. She stated that Adrian had approved temporary control during a private meeting 3 days earlier, then reversed himself under Nia's influence. She presented the anonymous complaint, the lender rumors, and selected photographs as evidence that his judgment had been compromised. Adrian did not interrupt. Daniel began with the transaction timeline, showing 6 payments to Rowan Legal Services and the absence of valid invoices. Adrian's tablet had authorized transfers from the estate, but Adrian's phone, vehicle log, and public event records placed him miles away. Celeste argued that he could have approved the transactions in advance. Daniel then displayed the practice sheets and printer analysis. The same damaged roller pattern appeared on the sheets and the hidden amendment. Trust counsel confirmed that the library printer had produced both. Nia testified next. She described the courier entry, her forged signature, and the household access logs. Celeste questioned why a maid had examined private records. Nia answered that she had found a trust document inside the inventory binder she was responsible for maintaining, reported it immediately, and preserved evidence under written authorization. She produced the witness agreement and its timestamp, which preceded the anonymous complaint. Celeste suggested Nia wanted Adrian's affection and financial support. Nia stated that she had resigned that morning, would receive no payment beyond earned wages, and had independently funded her next semester. "My feelings do not alter a printer mark, a network log, or a forged signature," she said. Maribel appeared by secure video with her attorney. She testified that Celeste ordered false invoice descriptions, requested a draft amendment, and planned to attach its signature page to a document Adrian would believe was part of the wedding packet. Maribel identified the comment in the draft invoice and explained why she hid the warning. Celeste attacked her as a disgruntled former employee. Then Adrian introduced the signed amendment Celeste had submitted. On that day, Adrian's signature certificate had been disabled at Daniel's request, and all his devices had been sealed for examination. The signature page contained an identifier generated 2 days later by Rowan Legal Software. The page could not have existed on the date written above the signature. Celeste had backdated it and, in her haste, preserved the digital creation code. Trust counsel asked whether she wished to explain. Celeste claimed an administrative error. Daniel showed that the same identifier appeared in an email she sent to herself after midnight, with the message, "Final version for filing." Her defense collapsed not because anyone threatened her, but because her own record contradicted her story. The board suspended all payments to Rowan Legal, referred the matter for civil and professional review, and rejected the amendment. Celeste's engagement to Adrian ended in the same room where she had intended to take control. Before leaving, she looked at Nia and said, You think he will treat you as an equal? Nia answered. That will be his choice to prove, and mine to judge. The consequences unfolded over months rather than in a single victorious morning. Celeste lost her advisory role and faced a civil claim for the diverted fees. Licensing authorities opened an investigation. The disputed money entered escrow. Adrian remained head of Vale Hospitality and publicly accepted reforms: dual authorization for trust payments, independent document retention, and employee access to protected reporting channels. He admitted that concentrating authority around personal loyalty had created the conditions Celeste exploited. His reputation survived because he accepted accountability. Maribel received whistleblower protection and later joined a compliance firm. Daniel became the trust's permanent independent monitor. Nia completed her accounting certificate and left domestic service. She joined a community housing nonprofit, seeking experience no one could attribute to Adrian. On her final day at the estate, she returned her keys in the library where the hidden amendment had begun everything. Adrian wore the same navy suit he had worn during their first morning drive, though his black wool coat was folded over a chair. Nia wore a rust-colored blouse, dark trousers, and black flats. He said the house would feel different. She said that was no reason to stay. Then he asked whether, after her final paycheck cleared and her employment formally ended, she would meet him for dinner as a woman whose answer carried no professional consequence. Nia did not answer immediately. She reminded him that affection could not erase the imbalance they had lived inside. Adrian said he did not expect it to. He would not offer rescue, secrecy, or access as proof of love. He would offer time, honesty, and the freedom for her to walk away. Nia chose dinner. 6 months later, they were still moving slowly. Adrian attended public events without using Nia as evidence that he had changed. Nia kept her apartment, her job, and her finances separate. They disagreed about privacy, reputation, and the weight of his family name. Each disagreement became a test of Lillian's old advice. A trustworthy partner could challenge without controlling. On the anniversary of the canceled wedding, Adrian drove Nia along Lake Shore Drive before sunrise. This time she sat beside him by choice, wearing a dark green coat over her work clothes, her curls loose around her shoulders. He asked whether she regretted opening the linen binder. Nia said she regretted how close they had come to letting polished language replace truth. She did not regret the cost of exposing it. Adrian parked near the lake, where the city lights faded against the morning sky. He gave her no ring and made no dramatic promise. Instead, he showed her a revised family trust charter requiring independent oversight and employee representation. Nia read it carefully, corrected one ambiguous sentence, and handed it back. Adrian smiled. You still do not make anything easy. She answered. Easy was never the promise. Then she took his hand, not as his maid, not as his witness, and not as someone saved by his power, but as a woman choosing a man who had finally learned that trust was not granted by loyalty. It was earned through responsibility, evidence, and the courage to let another person remain free. Join Mafia Boss Times Black, made for long-form emotional stories about secrets, accountability, loyalty, and relationships built through voluntary choice.